And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Although deer farming is relatively new to North America, its history dates back centuries. In prehistoric times, the deer were an important source of food as well as a source for tools and weapons, which were crafted from antler. In Europe, venison became the preferred food of nobility. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 1990.
Animals are held under a strict sort of a confinement, an isolation to examine them for their health, for the health by Agriculture Canada. And hopefully that screening process will identify any particular problems and that sort of thing.
Actually, the federal people, Agriculture Canada, only quarantine animals coming in from offshore, from Europe or New Zealand. Animals shipped from eastern Canada are an issue between provinces. These deer from the U.S. were held in isolation there and tested for 4 diseases: TB, brucellosis, anaplasmosis, and blue tongue, all ailments of particular concern to cattle and sheep producers. Of particular concern to the BC Wildlife Federation president are other diseases and parasites.
Fallow deer has a parasite called a lung fluke. The world studies that have been done on the lung fluke are not conclusive on whether the fallow deer is the end host or whether the fallow deer can pass the lung fluke on. If it passed it on to wild stocks, we could lose our wild deer population very quickly. Come on, girls. Come on, girls.
Officials at the Provincial Agriculture Ministry's Animal Health Center in Burnaby contend giant liver fluke is common to red deer, but not fallow deer. Or, if they do get it, they are an end host. It goes no farther. Testing is being done in Alberta, where liver fluke has infected the Elk Island Wapiti herd. After aggressively pursuing several types of game farming for years, Alberta has now placed a moratorium on importing any game species. There are a number of parasites causing concern among game farm opponents: meningeal worm or brainworm, E. cervi, and a host of others with impossibly long names and potentially lethal effects. Effects that Steve Head thinks are not being fully allowed for in government quarantine procedures.
The people that are raising them are business people, and you can't blame them. They spent thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars on their facilities and on their stock. To be held in quarantine a long time, they're losing money. However, not holding them in quarantine for a sufficient amount of time and doing proper testing on them, the potential for losing their herds and our wild stocks is multiplied.
I would think their concerns have been taken care of because we have to apply to the government to bring these deer in here. We have to have a permit, and we have to make sure all regulations have been taken care of, which we've done. So I would think that's government responsibility to tell us of anything that needs to be taken care of. We've taken care of everything that they told us to. So we feel that they're safe animals as far as that goes.
Basically, the onus is on the operator to keep his herd clean, much like it would be for a cattle herd or any other animal livestock operation.
Okay.
I don't know if Agriculture Canada is testing the animals from time to time. I don't know.
McKelvey and Critchlow say they will be inspecting all of their animals at least twice a year and are prepared to check them for anything they are required to check for. They can't afford sick animals either, and do not think fallow deer will prove any problem.
They're a very hardy animal, and we've proven that, just by the trip over here. You take 100 hours in that truck, and the stress on the highway and everything, and then unload them here, and we had no problems, basically, with them.
One casualty in the trip?
One broken leg, and that's just because somebody didn't do their job right in the truck. Either slammed the door on the leg or something, but that's pretty minor, considering.
Did you lose that animal?
No, we didn't. No, we splinted that leg, and it's walking on it today.
But opponents aren't as concerned with how hardy fallow deer are as with how hardy some of the organisms they could host might be.
But when we get these animals out into the wild, if they escape, They take their diseases and parasites with them. A lot of those diseases and parasites are fatal to the wild stocks, and we just can't have that. It could be to a point, and why we're so adamant about it is that we could lose our natural wildlife and it would all be held within pens, again, for profit.
The price for an animal is approximately the same as you would see for a beef animal. Like a breeding doe at this point is around $1,200, $1,500, depending on who you're buying from. This weekend they were $1,500 at the place we went to look at. They're asking $1,500 for a breeding doe. And your bred cattle are going to bring probably about $1,200 for a good bred cow.
Well, most of the venison is back east, but there are some restaurants in Vancouver that have venison on their menu, and there apparently are some delicatessens that have it for sale.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. The first successful heavier-than aircraft were unpowered gliders. In 1853, British engineer George Cayley built the world's first real glider. It carried his terrified servant on a short flight across a small valley before crash landing. But before you bring you that archive story on Smithers gliding, let us return to the story on deer farming.
Critchlow says meat from these animals retails for from $7 to $20 per pound. And even if they're small, does at 100 and bucks at about 130 pounds, there's money in them because the meat is marvelous.
It's different, yes, different. Very unique taste in the fallow deer. Very pleasant flavor. And it's the best venison available to the chefs. In fact, they had a meeting of all the chefs I think it was in Seattle, and 5 chefs out of 10 claimed that it was the best meat available.
The partners feel fallow deer venison is unique enough in both its taste and the size of the cuts to prevent any major problems with poached local deer being passed off as legal commercial venison. And they believe fallow deer's territorial nature will prevent them mixing with local populations should they get through the fence. They believe, but they're not positive.
Well, I don't know. We were told it's not a problem. I don't want to test it. But we were told that they're very territorial animals. If perchance they got out, chances are they'd come back in the same place to be back where they're used to. So, like I say, I'm not interested in testing the theory.
It is the belief that much of this process is theory, not solid fact, when applied to northern BC, that has the BC Wildlife Federation concerned. Concerned enough to say that the risk to native wildlife is too great and there can be no compromise.
No, we have a very, very strong point of view on this, Walt. There's a lot of problems with game farming. Anytime you take any animal, including man, and you put them in an enclosed environment, pack them together tight, you have an increase in disease and parasites and problems. Health problems just abound in a situation where you take a wild animal and put them into a pen.
Steve Head does not blame the operators. He blames the provincial government for pushing game farming for its economic development potentials without adequate concern for Indigenous wildlife. The Fed wants the Environment Ministry playing a bigger role. They have the responsibility for wildlife, but according to Head, are out of the decision-making altogether.
The Ministry of Environment is out of it. The minister told me himself, if it's inside a fence, it belongs to Agriculture and Fisheries. If it gets outside the fence, it becomes a problem of the Ministry of Environment. Now, that was the official position, and we feel that's very wrong.
Bison and reindeer are also currently licensed to farm in BC. Similar commercial potentials exist, similar problems apply. The situation is even touchier when Indigenous species like elk or white-tailed deer are considered. Who owns wildlife? When is it poaching and when is it rustling? And who gets compensation for predator loss? There are a lot of questions for which answers may exist, but they're not being provided to all concerned parties, or the answers may not yet be known. The partners here are working hard to try to make a living and stay on the land.
I suppose it is a gamble in Canada, but they've been raised successfully in many parts of the world, and it's not as if it's a brand new thing. It is brand new here in Prince George, but they've been raised successfully in many parts of the world. And I don't really look at it as a gamble. I just look at it as a challenge.
They figure they'll know whether it flies within the next year. Whether the whole concept flies is going to depend, at least in part, on the ministries involved working more closely together and with the principals and the public that have such a large stake in what happens here.
It's the pure joy of flying. It's powerless flight. You have to read nature, you have to read the weather, local conditions, and from that aspect, it's much more of a challenge than powered flight.
That's Norbert Clausen, pilot, glider pilot, gliding instructor, and member of the Smithers Soaring Club. The club is a small group with a really good thing going, the fact that Smithers is a great place for gliding.
Smithers is unique in that we get a lot of thermals in the summertime, and we get ridge lift, and as you noticed today, we had some real good wave, and it's very hard to find all these different features in one gliding area.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Birds don't always flap their wings to fly. They sometimes soar by taking advantage of rising columns of warm air known as thermals, which large wingspans they can stay aloft for hours while expending minimal energy. Let us return to the archives as a glider instructor shares about other air currents.
Now, on the day that I visited the Smithers Soaring Club, the members were excited about a condition known as wave. Paul Shallifer, also an instructor with the Smithers Club, explains wave.
Well, today is a wave day. You've seen the long lenticular clouds, kind of flat, dish-shaped, stacked up clouds. They indicate that there's a wave occurring, and wave is it's caused by an obstruction in the atmosphere, like Hudson's Bay Mountain or a range of mountains, and it's just like a boulder in a stream. When the water flows over it, it creates a standing wave downstream. And the atmosphere, when the temperatures and the wind direction is right, flowing over the mountain, it creates a standing wave. And with the glider, we park in the up part of the wave, and as the glider is pushed backwards at the wind speed, which is 20 knots or so, we fly fast enough that we progress, that we stay in one place. And we just go up it like an elevator, 2,000 feet a minute, sometimes 4,000 feet a minute.
Now, Shallifer, I think, could be described as a man who takes the recreational activity of gliding seriously.
Well, I was driving by a glider port in the eastern part of the country in 1976, and I saw an airplane in the air, and I thought that looked like fun. And I haven't missed a weekend since.
Are you serious? Not a weekend since?
Well, in the wintertime sometimes, but I usually go somewhere else to try flying in the wintertime.
Maybe just on that, the season, if you, like here, for example, how long can you be gliding?
It's quite weather dependent, but we've started as early as the middle of March. Sometimes the snow is off the field and it dries out by then. And by the end of October, we tend to get wet weather, and so training isn't that good at that part of the year. But in the later part of the season, October, November, December, it gets pretty cold, but we get really good wave flying then. That's when the really high flights occur.
When Shallifer speaks of high flights, he's got first-hand experience.
Well, I was up to 23,000 feet several years ago, but that was basically just cold. At 23,000 feet, it's about minus 50, and you have to be quite bundled up. The highest high that I got here was a cross-country flight that I made several years ago to Burns Lake and back. And it was about a 6-hour flight. I stopped in every thermal along the way, and I shared, I think, just about every thermal I shared with an eagle, too. It was really quite a fantastic flight.
The Soaring Club is based at the Smithers Airport. While it has only about a dozen members, it owns a tow plane and 2 gliders. One is a sporty single-seater, able to handle aerobatics. The second has 2 seats, facilitating instruction, and, of course, taking someone up for a joyride. Everyone here is having fun, but people are attentive to detail. Pre-flight checks are done to ensure the craft is in good order.
We have the daily inspection.
The sport of gliding, its pilots and instructors fall under federal regulation. Norma Clausen says, however, it's not difficult to become a glider pilot or instructor.
You need a certain amount of experience. It's not very hard to become a gliding instructor. You need a certain number of hours and experience, and you have to participate in an instructor's course, and you'll be judged by senior instructors, and they will either certify you as fit or unfit to instruct.
As part of the pre-flight inspection, the tow rope is shown to the glider pilot before being connected to the craft. If deemed all right, the connection is made, the plane is balanced for the initial part of takeoff, and away she goes. Clausen says rising air is a necessity for gliding.
Yes, because gravity tends to pull you down all the time. The rising air is either provided by warm air lifting from the ground up, or air currents over the mountains, or air moving up a slope, and you fly in that rising air just a little bit out ahead of the slope, and you can maintain your altitude and you can cruise along for hours.
What maybe would be some of the hazards, or what would be the conditions on a day that you choose not to go up?
Well, you'd have to be, you wouldn't want to fly in too turbulent conditions. If you have extreme crosswinds, it'd be difficult to land the glider. You want to avoid thunderstorms in the summertime because of the tremendous updrafts and downdrafts. You want to stay away from the mountain when it's, blowing more than 20, 25 miles an hour. You get into a rotor and it can be pretty dramatic. You can scare yourself pretty nicely.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Coastal people carved hemlock wood, which is easily worked into spoons, combs, roasting pits, and other implements. The wood is an even grain and resists scraping. In this final segment of Open Connection, we return to the archives to a Kitimat Museum exhibit.
The style of the Bauhaus, which is glorifying the machine age. It's a kind of streamlined design. But the interesting thing is that also we can detect the influence of the arts and craft, which of course was going against the machine age.
Cabinet makers and artists in wood were inspired by what they saw.
Those who work in wood, whether they are carvers or they are cabinet makers, they love it. And one thing I found is not just that they like it, but they were very inspired by the pieces, and they felt that it was important that this exhibition was here so they could see other ways of producing with wood.
One of the most interesting pieces was a collapsible table made from a single sheet of plywood, which had some special effects.
The effect of the play between the flat square area and this which is more oblique, it is like a trompe d'oeil.
That was in style when?
Well, the trompe d'oeil, it was very much in the style in the 20th century with the op art, which was in the 60s. And in the op art, you will see geometrical shapes, such as the chessboard type of shape. But of course, it was back in the Renaissance, it was very much in the style too.
Included was a student's desk, which at first glance looked very utilitarian, but was much more complicated when examined closely.
The cabinet maker here understood stresses, so he's reinforcing and making sure that things will not collapse by the way he's spreading the stresses in all directions rather than just in few points, as it happens with, as you are mentioning, the package furniture. It is a prototype desk, therefore it can be reproduced in a mass production way. And of course that goes back to the arts and craft, where you produce a piece that is handmade, but it can be reproduced again and again, keeping the same quality, which should be a good quality.
There were several lamps which showed a very strong Japanese influence, and this one had some unusual features.
Yes, and it's versatile in regard to the looks, because you can move it. And you see, there you are. You have a screen here, and then there is a second screen there. And it has the Japanese style. And in this case, I think it's wood mimicking stone. This type of lamp, this small compact lamp and very solid looking, was made of stone for the Japanese gardens.
One of the exhibits made everyone smile. The coffee table, a play on the initials of the Council of Forest Industries, and it showed the artist had a real sense of humor.
The artist of this piece obviously has a wonderful sense of humor. As you can see on the front, there is a title to the table. It says Hemlock Coffee Table. And each word or each particle stands for something, symbolizes something. The hem means the hem of a skirt. And one of the legs of the table, and we can see it right here, looks like the hem of a skirt. Then lock stands for the other leg of the table, which is a paddle lock. Then coffee stands for the Council of Forest Industry, which is the institution of the body that has sponsored this exhibition. And then, of course, table stands for the whole piece.
The Bauhaus influence was illustrated most markedly by this armchair.
Well, here what we have is very typical of the Bauhaus that started, of course, in 1919. And it's a streamline that glorifies the machine age, and it has a play of solid planes with hollow planes. And that's something that they used to do in everything, including architecture.
Very simple construction techniques that have withstood the test of hundreds of years were used. Tongue and groove and simple pegs that enhance the plain but lovely design. And there was one cabinet that I would have loved to have taken home.
It is a very elegant and simple design, but at the same time is functional. As we are going to see, can be used for dishes or any other thing. One thing I found is as a visitor comes and looks at this cabinet, automatically the visitor will say, oh, this is for my collection of stones. Oh, it's for my jewelry. It's for, so it shows the versatility of the function.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind to his heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our mystery within. I'm Robert Pictou.